Hey everyone, welcome to Author Journey. My name is CJ Anaya, and today we are going to do a little tutorial for tension, basically tension on every page. This is for beginning writers, but this is also a good brush up for advanced writers and intermediate writers. Really, it's good to review this all the time anyway, and to remind ourselves that tension is extremely important when we are writing a book. I get a lot of questions about why a person's book isn't succeeding or why it's not keeping a reader's interest, and so we're going to go into that. I made a video previously about backstory and how that can cause problems with tension if there's too much of that. This is going to go into a little more depth over a few other issues that can happen. So tension within a story can manifest itself in many ways. So I want to make sure that we identify ways that we can manifest that tension. Okay, so it can be an obvious aggressive move. So the obvious things I think are things that people can think about right away. Any fights breaking out, any danger. People pulling out a gun and holding it to someone's head. Obviously, that's going to up the tension. That's going to up the stakes when people's lives are in danger. That kind of a thing. So that's an obvious move right there. But your whole book can't be people pulling out guns or swords or fighting. Like, it's not all going to be action. There's going to be other things involved. Underlying jealousy. So now we're focused on more subtle things like emotion and how you can convey that emotion between relationships without necessarily saying anything. Or having the dialogue come right out and say, hey, I'm jealous of you. Obviously, that's poor writing. So things that you can hint at, things that you can show with gestures or with dialogue in a different way, or just by actions. Unresolved family issues, secrets that have never been spoken about. I think that we all know those families, and maybe you're a part of that family, where you just never actually talk about the issue. You tiptoe around things, and that causes tension. It creates conflict, but there's that underlying problem that never really gets resolved or talked about or aired out, and that's a great way for tension to manifest itself within a story. Subtle yearnings for better things to come when all hope seems lost. That, I think, is a great way to show tension in a book. This would be a survivor story. Maybe someone who has been kidnapped, or someone who is being oppressed, or someone who is devastated because they just lost their job. There are ways that you can show that emotion and that feeling, and maybe hint that it's happening, or help the reader feel this emotion as well to up that tension. So it's not always about life and death scenarios. It's always something where you can go a lot deeper into the scene and make people feel the heightened emotions of what your characters are feeling. Sexual tension between two love interests that manifests itself in many ways. It can be antagonistically, okay? And obviously this is very prominent in romance books. But it needs to be present in other books that have hints of romance in them, or subplots that have romance in them. Because with the antagonistic thing, it could be the girls playing hard to get, or maybe they just really hate each other, but they secretly like each other. I think we all know that story. So that's great tension. That's great conflict right there. It really helps to keep you involved, because there's dissonance, there's friction. There's disagreements. We love that. We don't like smooth sailing. That doesn't make for an interesting story. Torn between love and duty. That is a very common thread in romance novels, that they're torn between family duty and loving this woman, or this girl is high class and shouldn't be dating this guy who is a biker, or something like that. You don't want to let the family down, or it could be military duty, or something like that. Or you're torn between two love interests. So there's a lot of different ways that you can manifest tension within romance novels, or any novel. These are just a few that I've listed to try to get your mind thinking creatively, so that you can consider what aspects of your novel could incorporate these things in them. Are you writing a romance book? Are you writing an action book? Are you writing a psychological thriller? Are you writing about jealous sisters, who are trying to one-up each other? What can you do to create more tension for your book, okay? So there's ways to do, here's one more. Subtle longing for love and acceptance from a parent. Man, I read that in a book recently. which was very good. And emotionally, they portrayed that longing for love and for acceptance through the way that this guy went after sports, and when he failed, the feelings that he was dealing with, the repercussions of failing and not being able to eat at the dinner table with the rest of the family, or just these little things that he hinted at that he didn't even necessarily explain right away. So in the back of your mind, oh, something's not right. That is great tension right there. Good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about what causes low tension. Dialogue with inane chit-chat. I think we've all read those books where people are sitting at a table eating, and they're talking about the weather and a baby shower, or they're sipping coffee and tea, or maybe they're on an airplane and we get 2 pages worth of the trip on the airplane, but nothing really happens. The only time I really recommend people sitting down and talking at a table is if it's actually contributing to the story in some way. Are there underlying currents there? Are you sitting at a family table with the appearance of being a family, but there are other issues at play amongst individuals? The dialogue has double meanings, or the father says one thing and then looks at the mother, and that sense of things not necessarily being right. There's a difference between that and just sitting down and having to read about someone eating a cookie and coffee with a friend, and it's great, and they're all buddy and getting along, but nothing is happening. Nothing's happening. And you sit there and you go, what is happening? And so maybe it seems like that should be part of the book, but because nothing is happening, your readers, even though they're like, oh, that's a nice part of the book, they're going to lose interest. It's not pulling them in. It's not pushing them to read more. And so they set the book down. And if they get distracted and they have to set the book down, there's no compelling reason for them to go back and pick it up. And then they lose interest and they don't go back to it and they don't finish it. And that is not what you want. You want a situation where even if they're at the dinner table, or even if they're sitting down somewhere, it seems like nothing is happening. Stuff is really happening. So make sure that you incorporate tension within those periods where it seems like either the dialogue is slacking or the action is slacking. Make sure that tension emotionally is still there, where things really are happening, even if nothing is being said or nobody is doing anything. Study different ways that you can do that. Dean Koontz, man, he's the master of that. He's so good at that. And Stephen King, obviously, I love those guys. I read their books all the time. But I don't write that genre, actually, probably because I know I could never master anything as beautiful as that. It's so good. I just want to sit and read it. Okay. So the next thing is inner dialogue that does nothing to further the story. It doesn't introduce conflict. It doesn't create friction. It doesn't offer room for dissent. If it's just thoughts about going to school. I remember reading a teen novel that I had to set down because I had to read 2 paragraphs about her opening her locker and examining what was in her locker, and there was a mirror, and I need to do my hair, and it was very important to talk about all the highlights that I had in it. Nothing was happening. Now, if she had opened that locker, looked in, and we noticed a picture of her and her boyfriend, and suddenly she became just like punched in the gut, and like in her mind she thought, I thought I'd thrown that away. Why is that still there? That would have been awesome. That could have been really helpful. So sorry, my phone is ringing and I don't want this to interrupt us. So distractions. So that would have been really cool if she would have opened it up and would have hinted at, why do I have this picture of me and my boyfriend in here? I thought I took it down. Things aren't all that they seem, then that could have introduced us to something really creative. There's obviously a problem here. She's not with her boyfriend anymore. She thought she took that photo down. What is it doing there? Then we're drawn in more rather than her opening the locker and talking about her highlights. Oh man, I didn't get very far in that book. So those are the kind of things you want to do to create more tension. Creating an easy out for your protagonist or resolving conflict too easily and far too soon. Okay, so it's great if you introduce the conflict, but if you resolve it like within halfway through the book or a fourth of the way through the book, that is not going to be very satisfying. You essentially don't have any story left. Or if the conflict gets resolved far too easily, that's low tension, then the tension drops. And suddenly it feels like we didn't really get much of a payout, we weren't left breathless at the end of it. It didn't feel I don't know, winning just didn't feel like we deserved it because there was no work or effort involved in getting to that conclusion and resolving that conflict. So that's when moments of low tension can hit, and they can hit hard. And if that's a dissatisfying resolution, then the whole book as a whole, it's just going to be one big flop. So you want to make sure that the conflict is high, and the way to fix it is very difficult. Like, it's just not going to be easy either way you look at it. So don't give them easy outs, and don't resolve the conflict too soon. Otherwise, you're going to cause a lot of low tension in your book. Info dumps, we talked about that. Backstory, you have excessive amounts of that, and it'll get you every time. And it got me every time. I was just telling you guys about how, you don't want to do that. I just sent a manuscript in to my editor, and I don't know why I pointed that way because she's not there. But I just sent a manuscript to my editor, and she came back with, hey, you've got a block of backstory, break it up. And I know this, but everybody makes mistakes too. No matter how far you are in your journey, there's going to be points where you're writing things and it doesn't occur to you, oh, I really need to break this up, which is why an editor is super critical, and beta readers, so that they can pick out the things that you can't see. So even someone who has experience writing is going to mess up and not catch those types of things. So avoid massive info dumps and backstory. That's not going to help you when it comes to low tension. I read this memoir by Alan Cumming, and it was just incredible. It was so fabulous. It's called Not My Father's Son. I don't know if any of you have read it, but I just want to give you an example of narrative tension, of inner dialogue, or just, tension where nothing is necessarily happening, but you are so pulled into the book, and there's so much that is being told, even though nothing is necessarily happening. So I want to read this to you and then point out why this works so well. So this is from Not My Father's Son by Alan Cumming. Memory is so subjective. We all remember in a visceral, emotional way. And so even if we agree on the facts, what was said, what happened, where and when, what we take away and store from a moment, what we feel about it, can vary radically. I really wanted to show that it wasn't all bad in my family. I tried so hard to think of happy times we all had together, times when we had fun, when we laughed. In the interest of balance, I even wanted to be able to describe some instances of kindness and tenderness involving us all, but I just couldn't. I spoke to my brother about this. He drew a blank too. Now, I love this so much because he's talking about what he couldn't find. I mean, memory is so subjective. That's great. We all remember in a visceral, emotional way. So he's appealing to what we've all experienced before and roping us in there. And I think we can already feel that this memory, whatever it is, there's an undertone that's just makes you feel a little uneasy, like this isn't going to be a good memory. Whatever it is, he's not going to remember anything very good. And so then he talks about what they didn't have. Happy times, not a ton of happy times, not a ton of fun, not a ton of laughter, and he does that in a way where he says he was trying to think of it, but he couldn't. He wanted to find instances of kindness and tenderness. And so what we're getting is a very real look at what he remembers from his childhood. And he's not saying a ton, and he's not describing in detail what his life was like yet. But already we're getting a sense that at home it wasn't great. There was no tenderness. There was no kindness. And when you think about that, it's like, oh my gosh, what kind of a home life did he have? What happened to make it so that he couldn't remember any real good times, even though there probably were some, but he just off the top of his head couldn't. And then to know that his brother drew a blank as well. That's high tension right there. That is good stuff, because once you read this, you think to yourself, okay, well, I want to keep reading to figure out what his childhood was like. Why can't he remember these things? So this is an example of tension in a narrative that is it's fabulous. Nothing is necessarily happening, but we're being told in a really interesting way that nothing was good at home. Not all was well. So I just wanted to give you an example of that, because I always learn better through examples, through reading things, through studying other people's works, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and this works. This is an example of what works. And so, take that and do what you will with it. But I'll tell you what, every time I read this book, I marvel at how well written it is. besides the fact that his life is just amazing anyway, and he's an amazing person. I really am impressed with how this whole book was written. So what can you do to up the tension in your book? Being given examples of things, the right way to do things is helpful. But actually doing exercises is also helpful. I live by this book that Donald Mass has written, and I'm hoping that I'm saying his last name right. But he does Writing the Breakout Novel, and he has a workbook that has so many writing exercises in it, and I wanted to take a page. I don't want to take credit for this idea. This is all his, and you can find his books. I'll put a link to his book on Amazon or in the description below so that you can follow it. But this is what he suggests. This is just one little snippet of his brilliance when it comes to how you should write a really good book. You turn to any page in your manuscript. If your manuscript is done, great. If you're writing, try to keep all these things in mind, and then once you're done with your manuscript, come back to this and do this. It's a lot of work, but it will benefit you so much, I promise. So you turn to any page in your manuscript and you pick a random line, okay? Figure out a way to up the tension in that one moment, okay? And if you already have tension there, ask yourself how you can up it further. So it could be a random line. If you need to take like the whole paragraph and figure out how to make that moment, that particular moment in the book, more interesting, filled with more tension, filled with more conflict, whatever you need to do, then do it. That will be a cool, fun exercise for you to do. Then go to another random page and find another random sentence and rinse, repeat, okay? Now, this is a fun, I think, activity to do, but if you really want to be an overachiever, like if you want to go crazy with this and really get down to, I don't want any low moments in my book. I want to make sure that this book the pacing is great and nobody wants to put this book down. You can go through all of your pages in your manuscript. I'm not necessarily saying like, make every single line, I think that would be too much, but go through all of your pages and in no particular order, just up the tension, okay? So just randomly flip through one, flip through another, find every page, take a look at it, examine that page, and see if there's a way that you can up the tension further. And if it's already got a lot of tension on it, see if you can reach a little further. As Donald says, go deeper and see if you can make it even more compelling and more interesting to read. Now, just a little hint, and I've put that at the bottom there, beta readers, okay? When you've done everything you can to build that tension in your book and make it compelling and help it to push forward, make sure your editor takes a look at it, fix that, do all the rewrites, but then send it to your beta readers. And be very specific when you send your review copies to your beta readers, and mention the things you'd like them to look out for. Obviously, spelling, punctuation, if they want to look at that, they can. But ask them specifically, are there any moments in this book that make you want to set it down, where you lose interest? They don't have to tell you why they lose interest. They don't have to give you suggestions. That's not their job. All they need to do is say, oh, on this page of this paragraph, I was kind of bored. Just have them be very specific about when and where it is, and that's all you need to know, because then it's your job to go in and fix it and figure out how to make it more exciting. So that's one way to kind of speed up this process and, get some help from other people, a set of other eyes, because you may go through your book and feel like it's great, but you just didn't see what could be fixed. You didn't see how it could be even better. So that's a suggestion that I would use. And I've done that with my beta readers. I have a group of amazing beta readers, and they are super helpful, and they're always so willing to shoot me an email and let me know what is wrong with my book, and I appreciate that. I'm always grateful for the critiques. Anything they can find, whether it's spelling or low tension, no matter what, I'm super grateful to have their eyes on my book. So I hope this helped you to identify low moments of tension in your book, to know what low tension is and how you can fix it. I'm going to put in the description all those links that I mentioned and any resources that might help you with this. I find that while video is great, sometimes reading how to do things is even better. So any books that can help you, I will put in there. Please comment and like and subscribe if you felt like this was helpful. If you want to create a discussion about this and talk about different aspects of your book that you might need help on, any questions you have, I'm super eager and happy to help you. So I hope that you have a fabulous, wonderful day, and we will talk to you later. Alrighty? You guys take care. Bye-bye.